Good morning, everyone. I will call the Cook County Board of Commissioners to order as a special meeting. This is not a closed meeting. This is recorded on the YouTube, so for folks who are not able to be here, you'll be able to view the meeting. First item on the agenda is Lutsen Mountain's application for fireworks permit. Then we'll go on to the transfer of the station, and we will have Bruce EHLERS on with us then, and then we'll talk about the county administrator, and then finally we will turn it over to Attorney Peterson. So we'll start with the fireworks permit. Brady?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a request from Lutsen Mountains for a fireworks permit. They do this frequently, not in a recent last couple of years, but the reason it's on today is just that the event is going to happen before our next regular scheduled meeting. So your approval is subject to the sheriff's final inspection and approval.
We're lucky that it worked out that we had a meeting today for them, because they were asking for it pretty soon.
True.
Any questions or comments on this? I'll hear a motion then to approve.
So moved.
Support. Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Thank you. So moving on to the transfer station. Rowan, would you like to take over on that?
Sure. Over the weekend, EHLERS provided us with some updated numbers and is available for a call. The numbers are based on the conversation that the board had at the last meeting regarding the transfer station, the cost options in the outlying shops, as well as the model presented by Assessor Thompson. And so this is the updated numbers based on those conversations. Brady, would you want to add to that?
Yeah, so they've adjusted how the fees are assessed based on the classification method that we talked about at the last meeting. And then they've put it into their schedule with total revenues and the bond issuance amount, $5,900,000, what the payments are, and they've made the payments here fit what we'd need to collect in order to cover those bond payments. So, and you can see the fees change with whether or not vacant fees are included. The base fee for residential is $50 when vacant land is included, and $75 when it's not. So those are the two major changes in those versions. And the multifamily and commercial is higher also by $100 with vacant land included and $150 without. So questions? And I know EHLERS is available, I think, right now, as soon as we call them.
Give them a call.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can we, when we talked about this before, it seems like we had 3 categories to distribute those costs. Now we have 2, unless I'm, not reading something correctly on here. But when we look at the difference between with and without vacant lots, and I think our charge at that time was simply to say, meaning the homework was to try to make this equitable so that everybody that benefits would participate, but at the level that we thought was rightly applied, fairly applied. So if you had a vacant lot, it would be different than residential, it would be different than commercial, but I do not see 3, I see just the 2.
Yeah, you don't see the rest of their calculations down below. I think we should get them on in order to explain that.
Thank you.
So.
Good morning, this is Bruce.
Good morning, Bruce.
Good morning.
We have you here with the board on speaker, and Brady and I just gave a brief summary of the updated information that you provided us over the weekend. And if you'd like to maybe provide some additional context before we open it up to questions from the board, would that be all right?
Sure, that would be just fine. So I caught the tail end of a little bit of discussion, and we can work the fee structure however you would see fit. We did update our scenarios with the new and improved parcel information from the county and the county assessor. The base case scenario, which you probably gathered, is assuming no fees on vacant parcels and just on developed residential and developed multifamily and commercial parcels. And in that scenario, the fees, in order to sort of fund all of the assumptions shown below, would be $75 per year for residential parcels, and then $150 per multifamily and commercial unit. Again, those fees are necessary in accordance with the lower parcel counts that were received from the county. And I would also point out that they do provide some capacity for both annual operating expenses as well as future capital expenses. And if you don't have those capital expenses, then we could of course look at a lower annual amount and or less inflation over the 10-year projected period. But we did want to provide some capacity in this cash flow model, not just for debt service, but for some prospective cash-funded capital projects, and also to build a fund balance of a modest fund balance over a period of time. So why don't I stop there and ask what questions you have about sort of those assumptions and that first base case, assuming no fees on vacant parcels.
Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the explanation. I just would like to clarify with the board, in our discussion, I guess I left that discussion, and this is following my comment previously, that I felt that we wanted to have a basis that would be inclusive of everybody that benefits from the facility. And so therefore, we wanted to see scenarios that would be with or without vacant land, but still in what we see represented here is we see without vacant parcels, and when we say with vacant parcels, because it says residential, multifamily, and commercial, we have two categories, and I don't see where the vacant parcel is included in that unless the vacant parcel is going to be charged the same as the residential. Is that a correct statement, Bruce?
Well, again, these are just scenarios based on the input that we received from the county staff, but we can look at that second scenario, Commissioner Gamble, and that second scenario assumes that vacant parcels would be charged the same fees based on their classification as residential and then as the same as multifamily and commercial. Again, you can structure these any way you want. Again, our task as assigned was to come up with ways of funding the cash flow. And in that second scenario, the property types would pay, it would be $50 per year for residential parcels, including vacant residential parcels, and then $100 per year for multifamily and commercial. Again, it's not hard to extrapolate between the two scenarios and come up with something in between. If you wanted vacant parcels to pay a nominal amount, we could figure that out pretty easily, and then you could see how the residential and multifamily would have to pay somewhere between, residential would be paying somewhere between 50 and 75 in this construct, and multifamily and commercial would be paying somewhere between 100 and 150. Again, if you wanted the vacant parcels to be paying at a lower amount.
Thank
So
you.
these sort of give you two, bookends, if you will, on how to fund the cash flow, again, assuming some level of future capital projects as well.
Thank you, Bruce. Madam Chair, here again, I just asked the board, did you leave our last meeting and discussion on this with an understanding that we wouldn't look at vacant differently than we were looking at residential?
I felt that we would be looking at vacant land as it's currently assigned.
On this document, you mean?
Yeah.
Is that the understanding of everybody? Okay, I guess I misunderstood that because I just thought we were going to, based upon what we actually see with the evaluation coming from Dusty on what he's seeing with intake, and then how we would create a graph, to distribute those costs. And so I was just under the impression that that was the case, but I guess I was misunderstood.
Commissioner White?
Yes. Is there not vacant commercial land also? And is that going to be subject to a higher rate? I don't see that on this chart, but the question is, if there is vacant commercial land with the potential for income, greater income than a residential vacant land, what is the fee structure for that?
Again, if it's vacant but classified commercial, under this scenario, would pay $100 per year.
So, yeah, so they just haven't broken it out, but it's staying with the classification that it has. If it's vacant commercial, then it shows up. It's
As
part of the
commercial.
commercial on the second one. If it's vacant residential, it's showing up on the residential line and paying that fee.
I see.
Commissioner Mills?
Thank you, Chair. So to answer your question, Commissioner Gamble, when we left the conversation, I was under the impression, it was my understanding that we were going to be looking at it based on classification.
Correct?
But not vacant or not necessarily, just classification. So whether it's vacant or if it's not vacant, it's still classified the same. And so that's what I thought, just for the stability of those payments and trying to make some sense of everything. But
Okay.
I hear what you're saying, and I don't think it's a bad thing to look at. I'm just trying to think about what we talked about as far as basic services, like paying for a road, whether or not the land on the road is vacant or not, that sort of thing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. I guess intent, from my, perspective, is to understand it in the context so that the public, when they look at it, they say, they've thought that through and that seems fair and equitable. When things seem to be well-reasoned, then people are more accepting of it. That's why I'm just saying our position should be well-informed and based upon an understanding of how is it being used and trying to look at it in the short term and the long term. The other thing I would say in Bruce's comment is that this scenario is built on inclusion of capital expenditures to maintain the facility, which under our understanding, and the public should be aware, is for the county. It's owned by the county. So we're building into it ongoing capital, improvements, which is wise and good financial stewardship. The operating costs is a little fuzzy to me. If it is setting aside funds for the unexpected, then I could see that being a county decision to do that. But if it's funds that are set aside to supplement operating costs, then I think we cross a line that's a bit confusing, differentiating from our ownership of the building and their operation costs being funded through services. That's all I'd say, is I'd need further clarification on this scenario that's included in operating costs, because I don't believe that that was the intent, and I don't know legally if we're in a position to be able to do that. It would have to be associated with funds that are building up for the unexpected relative to the building.
And
That's not covered in the capital.
Yeah, and Madam Chair and Commissioner Gamble, I think I misspoke earlier. Those are both categorized as capital expenses, and I think, Commissioner Gamble, you're right. The sort of purple shaded bar of roughly $26,000 a year is a placeholder sort of for ongoing maintenance of the facility. The Roby below that, starting a few years from now, would really be for any new capital expenditures for, let's say, maybe expansions of the facility. It was our understanding from talking with county staff that there might be some additional solid waste related capital expenses. And so we included a placeholder for that as well. And that would really be up to the board to decide, whether and how you wanted to allow for possible expansions of the scope of this fund and the capital projects that would be paid for from this fund.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce, on that. I was wondering what the purple line meant, so thank you for describing
Sure.
that. Any other comments? Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mentioned this last week, but we do have some of the public here, and for the public that chooses to follow this, I was trying to look at this in the context of decisions that we make as a board on behalf of citizens of the county, that we don't layer things so that we are adding more tax burden. But we look at it in the context of prioritizing what we look at as beneficial to citizens of the community, and we offset dollars as opposed to layering dollars. And so in my comment at our last meeting, I just said there are actually three things, but two things to look at. The Cedar Grove Business Park, right now, a citizen that has a home that is $300,000 evaluated, citizens are paying in combination with Grand Marais citizen, Cook County resident citizen, because there's assessment in each of those categories, if you have a $300,000 home, you are paying $57 right now in your levy that is going towards retiring the debt on the business park. If you have what our county assessor says is the median price of a home, 400 and some in Cook County, you are paying $85 a year towards the indebtedness on our Cedar Grove Business Park. If you look at the transfer station, or not the transfer station, but the recycling center, right now, citizens in Cook County are paying $16 annually to subsidize the difference between revenue generated and the overall cost of that. So when I'm looking at it as a taxpayer, I'm saying, okay, these dollars, the business park, that debt, theoretically, we're hoping to pay it off earlier. It's scheduled to be paid off in 2031. That if you're paying for a median price home $85 now, and you're paying $16 on the 78% that taxpayers are funding for our recycling center, which will be absorbed by the transfer station, that is my point about not layering additional costs, but prioritizing projects and looking at where money is now that will transfer to that. If we keep in mind as decision makers that this is how that money is allocated. So just that point of information for people that are going to pay.
Madam Chair, and I would add to Commissioner Gamble's statements about the recycling center, in addition to the operating costs and expenses that he mentioned, there's the deferred maintenance and capital improvement cost in addition to those as well. And so our facilities director, Brooke Lassard, put together the numbers and shared with the board, going out over, I believe it's 500,000 within the first 10 years, 30 years is $1 million, and 1.6 over 60 years. And so when you're looking at a 100-year building, as we are here, and absorbing that in addition to the operational costs, those deferred maintenance and capital improvement costs were part of the consideration as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mills?
Thank you, Chair. The only, well, not the only. One of the things I was hoping that we were going to look at as far as classification was concerned is residential homestead being different than just residential, because there are a good number of residential non-homestead in our county. And so how difficult would it be to break that out and have that be at a different rate? And is that just making things too complicated and not worth it? I just think there could be benefit for the residents of Cook County if we took that structure.
Commissioner
Madam Chair.
Sullivan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things that we talked about at our last meeting, and I know Commissioner White and I think quite similarly on this, is that we want to make sure that we talked about including vacant parcels, because for people that can afford to have vacant parcels, it is a contribution. We also talked about keeping the process as simple as possible so that we are not creating additional work efforts for our staff that are looking in these areas. And then I also really appreciate Interim Administrator Watkins bringing up the fact that we are thinking about our transfer station in relationship to our recycle center and what we can potentially be saving as we move to a different facility. So given that, I really appreciate the work that EHLERS has done. I'm continuing to focus on the sheet that looks at the vacant parcels with a very clean and simple $50 for any parcel that's labeled residential and $100 for multifamily and commercial. Commissioner White, I'm wondering, how are you feeling about it now that you've looked at those new numbers? They're slightly higher.
Darn. Darn, 25 sounded much better, and it's tough being a land baron. It's a community. I go back to the fact that it's a community. I don't know what generation the vacant lands that are in my neighborhood, which is huge, could ever be developed because of wetland inaccessibility, but it's not saying it won't. But it's the price one pays to live in a healthy place and to contribute to the health of everyone and the well-being. And this is not for the tourists. This is for those of us that live in this county. And, ouch. I mean, it's a lot of extra money a year, but I believe that we need to have an efficient and reliable way to recycle, to do our compost, to do any number of things that this facility will allow us to do besides getting rid of trash, which pretty soon, the clock is ticking. Pretty soon, well, we could have small businesses with little signs that say, dump your trash here, $25, and I'm just kidding. But people will find the ditches and they'll find the back roads and because they can't afford it, and I get that. So I still believe that the vacant parcels should also be taken into consideration. It keeps it cleaner. To Commissioner Mills's point about homestead, does it make it that much more difficult to consider homestead? I mean, people that are they're setting down their roots and they are here contributing to the community. They are not our weekend guests who own property, or not to disparage any of them, but people that have actually made a commitment to this community, then shouldn't we cut them some slack if we can? And it might only be $3, David, I don't know, but I sure would feel better. Brady, EHLERS, anybody?
It's all possible. It's just the value of it versus the management costs.
We'd have to go back and refigure the numbers then, as far as
Well-
homestead goes. Is that right, Bruce? Of course, that would take a little while.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, yes, but as long as we have parcel counts that county staff feels good about, it's not a difficult exercise. You know, I just would say, playing devil's advocate, that the fact that we've got all residential parcels paying the same fee currently in these two scenarios, it already reflects your non-homestead people paying, in most cases, probably more proportionally as a amount or per gallon of trash or whatever the right metric is, and that's totally fine. If you changed the model so that residential non-homestead paid even more, then that balance would tip even further, proportionally speaking, towards those non-homestead properties than what it already is. But again, that's totally fine and within the purview of you all as county commissioners.
If I could just add on to that a little bit, I think that was some of the concern of Assessor Thompson, and if it was his recommendation that they were structured this way, as his office will be getting a lot of the calls and wanting to explain the rationale behind it. If we do make a change, I recommend we reach out to Assessor Thompson. He's at a conference today, but said he'd be available to be reached by phone. But just kind of to add to what Bruce shared, I think that was a concern and the intent behind the recommendation from Assessor Thompson.
Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we agreed at our last meeting, affirmed that we wanted to move forward with classification. That was going to be the basis. And it's unfortunate that Bob's not here to be able to answer this question. The other thing that we agreed is we wanted to make it as simple as possible. The third component that I think is of value is that to the public, it should look as fair as possible. And I think in that context, that if classification, fairness, based upon our understanding and asking the question of the provider, that we distribute costs in the context of classification based upon awareness, to, like Commissioner White's comment about people that are established here, that we can speak to the issue of how we met as simple as we can make it, as fair as we can make it, and so I see with what we've agreed to in the classification, if we know what the parcels are, we simply take the parcels times that. The challenge comes in running the scenario to see, based upon what we determine to be fair, how that meets the debt. But I think it's entirely doable, and it would meet the three objectives if we try to be as fair as we can, classification, and demonstrate that we've done our due diligence. That would be my recommendation.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Madam Chair, as we look at, we all agree that classification is the way to go. We want to keep it very simple or basic. And the fact that properties proportionally pay more in residential if they are, part-time residents versus full-time, I would like to make a motion that we move forward with the solid waste fund with vacant parcels, with residential being $50, multifamily and commercial being $100 annually.
Commissioner.
Commissioner White?
And to go back to the comparison with roads, if you come up once a year or once every 5 years, you are still assessed, or you pay for the roads, whether or not you use them. So in that respect, I agree with you. So, but I still think homesteaders should be applauded for sticking it out, but, yeah.
And that's why I say it, I feel that proportionally, homesteaders are paying less with this model, and so I support it, and that's why I made the motion.
So I'll second that.
Yes.
And just for further discussion, I really appreciate the explanation from you, Bruce, and Rowan, and Commissioner Sullivan and Commissioner Gamble, just helping me, and Commissioner White, and all of us, helping me go through just what is that balance point and where, it's not an easy point, and I agree that non-homestead residential non-homestead will be paying proportionally more. I'm just always trying to look for that angle for residential homestead, and this is this could help, but there's probably a better mechanism than how we organize this, so.
Commissioner White?
And let us not forget, residential, that's not homesteaded, this is not a primary residence for anybody.
Right.
So it's people with the means to own another building in another county. So, thank you. Thank you for helping us.
Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify, that under the scenario that we're speaking of and that the motion is made, that there is no differentiation between residential and homestead. It just, all will pay the same if it's under that classification. So basically, what is before us is what we're choosing to approve. That vacant will pay, residential will pay the 50, and then commercial will pay the 100. And if that's the understanding, and that's what we support, then we'll do it. But
That is
won't-
your intent, Commissioner Sullivan?
That is my intent.
Yes.
Exactly. And what you're looking at is that people that are not here year-round are paying more per load, if you will. They're paying the same fee that a full-time resident is paying, but they aren't contributing as much trash.
Okay.
Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then I think it should be clarified so the public is aware that this isn't like a membership. This fee that is assessed isn't like a membership, so that means that you can bring trash there and this fee is covering it. This is to fund a county facility through an assessment, and you will continue to pay based upon the fee structure that the transfer station has. And I'm assuming that recyclables, right now we bring recyclables in, and that is a service that's provided, and there's no fee associated with that other than what you pay in taxes. So just so it's understood, this is an assessment to cover the county's investment in the facility.
Correct.
Any further discussion? Because we have a motion and a second on the floor.
And it should be pointed out that we as a county have been really fortunate through all these years that we've had a private business that has taken care of this for us. I don't think there are many, if any, counties that have had that gift, as it were, of not having to have, well, and we've tried it, to have our own landfill and everything. So this is our solution on the table at the moment.
And we do have to look to the future, because the future means recycling, and it means all kinds of situations with trash and construction goods and all of that. And that's where this facility will take a big load off of an area that we know is not good. Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to clarify that the motion is in support of, in other words, the board's in agreement that as it is put out by EHLERS here, that these figures reflect money set aside for capital improvement. So in other words, it's our intention to leave this, because Bruce had said if you wanted to work with those numbers, we could reshuffle them. But if this motion includes an understanding that those monies will be there for future improvements and maintenance, then the motion supports that, just so we're aware of that.
Okay.
And Madam Chair and
Yes.
Commissioners, if I could just jump in for 1 second, I know you're considering a motion, but this will be a living, breathing fee, and if, to Commissioner Gamble's point, if it doesn't look like you need to spend as much on maintenance, or if for whatever reason you decide as a board not to pursue some of those future capital projects, whether they be a facility expansion or something else, then of course you could always not inflate the fee by the 2% that we're showing currently, or you could do something else down the road. So we would certainly recommend you work with your team there to keep an eye on this fund and its priorities and its needs, and adjust down the road as appropriate.
Very good point. Thank you on that. things are always adjustable, you know, that's the whole nice thing about having a base. Then we move
Right.
and we say, we'll be a little more flexible as things happen. Any more comments or concerns? Otherwise, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Bruce, for all your work. Appreciate everything, and maybe we'll be in touch. And to Dustin, good for you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce.
Yep,
Thanks,
bye-bye.
Bruce.
Okay.
I'm just asking respectfully that when anyone speaks, if you would please raise your voice perhaps a little and be right up to your mic. It was wonderful to be able to hear Bruce so clearly. 'Cause some of us don't hear as well as we wish we could. Thank you.
Sometimes we're talking on mic.
So, Administrator Rowan, is there a time frame for Pat to join us?
We told him between 9 and 9:30, so we can
Okay.
give him a call.
Before we do that, before we have Pat join us on discussing the applicants that we have for the administrator, I would like to make a few comments. First of all, I'd like to say ahead of everything that there have been comments in the community, and one of the things that we cannot do as commissioners is to respond because the comments are like in a row and it begins open law meeting, so that's why you have not received any comments from us. But I'm going to give you some thoughts. And I always like to go back in history because I think we need to know where have we been so that we know where we're going. So I'm going to take you back to the early 90s. And this is how everything was run here. We had a lady named Janet Simonon, who was the personnel director, like what Allison does today. And Janet was the board secretary, and she took minutes. She put the agenda together, and that went on till about the mid-90s, until she realized that she needed some part-time help. And then that, because of that, work was increasing. So then around the early 2000s, each commissioner was a liaison to the department heads, 2 or 3 of them at a time. And at the time, the department heads felt that this was causing confusion, and there were issues that were among the departments because there wasn't one person helping and overseeing in the different departments. By 2013, Janet retired, and that was when the first conversation started about maybe looking at an administrator form of government. And at that time, there was a hiring firm who was hired, and they worked with the board who was on, who were the commissioners at that time, and eventually they hired the very first administrator, Jay Cleft. Unfortunately, Jay fell ill, and after a year and a half, he had to leave. And so then the county board again had discussion about how to search for candidates. A company was hired to help them, and at that time, Jeff Cadwell was hired. And after about 4 years, Jeff left to go to another county job. And once again, the board had the advantage of looking over the past 5 or 6 years to say, how is a county administrator really helping us? And so, with the help of a hiring firm, James, our last administrator, was hired. Then unfortunately, he had a family event that happened, a tragedy, and had to leave. So, starting toward the end of October, all of our board members felt that we needed to move forward, but we needed an interim, and therefore, Rowan Watkins stepped up. He left his department. He's in charge of IT. He left his department in good hands, I would have to say, but joined us as far as being interim administrator. And so we've been working with Rowan over the last few months. So that was the end of October. Now we're the first week of February, and we probably will not have a new administrator until pretty close to the 1st of April. And so I feel, in fairness to Rowan and in fairness to all of us, that we need to move forward in hiring an administrator to help facilitate all of our county needs. And I would just like to evaluate what is the role of a county administrator and how do they really help a county fulfill all the things that needed to be done. I feel that by having a county administrator, it improves services and efficiencies. We're able to plan for the future. We bring consistency to the departments, which is really important as we have department heads and we have employees, over 125, 30 part-time, about 130 people. The administrator sets policy and implements strategic planning for long-term capital spending. And that's one thing that Administrator Yorkie started a couple years ago. We have a strategic plan that goes out to 2030. An administrator reviews and prepares budgets, manages day-to-day operations, and is active in our community as a liaison between us and all of the community. We gathered together every few months with city administration, Grand Portage, superintendent, hospital, and we all have a discussion on what's happening and what's going on and fill each other in with all of that. An administrator is present during emergency situations. An administrator supports employees and disciplines when necessary. And I guess the last thing I'd like to say, which is really never quite pointed out, is the fact that our roles every 2-year changes. New commissioners perhaps will come on board. And we have as administrator the steady sail who will get us through and help us continue on without big, huge interruptions. And so I'd like to say that as we move toward our discussion this morning with discussing future administrator and the company that we have hired has done an excellent job in looking over all of the candidates. And now this morning, we will have discussion with them. So Rowan, if you would get Pat online.
I will. Thank you.
Hello, you reached Pat Melvin, unable to take your call. Please leave a message.
Hi, Pat. This is Rowan Watkins with the Cook County Board of Commissioners. We're just calling you. I'll try your cell again here. Thank you. Hi, Pat.
Good morning.
Good morning. We have you here with the board, and we're on to your spot in the agenda.
Wonderful, thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I just wanted to kind of give you an update and let you know that I'm going to be sending out some information later today. Basically, it's going to consist of the work personality index, the information disclosure statement, and then a video interview from our semifinalists. I know that I had sent earlier word that there were going to be 12. We have had 2 drop out because they have taken other positions. And then there's one that still has to do the video interview, which I'm working with that individual on. So that information will be coming out to you later this afternoon. And it's with that information that you'll be able to look at that information. That'll help you come to next week's meeting with kind of your top choices in terms of those candidates. Your top choices are the ones that you would like to invite in for an interview. And when we talk about those candidates next week, we'll be talking about them by number, not names, because they are considered, at this point, confidential applicants. It's only when they get invited in for an interview that they actually their name becomes public. So, do you have any questions for me about kind of what our next step is? Do you have any questions about, how we've gotten here? Obviously, we had a good number of applicants, 41 applicants for the position. I went through and reviewed those applicants, looking at what the minimum requirements were for the position, and I pushed forward to you the 12 top candidates for the county administrator position. So certainly willing to take any questions or have any discussion on anything at this point, but that's the short end of it.
Good morning, Pat. Thank you for that information. Commissioner White?
Could you please, for the public, this is Commissioner White, District 1. Good morning. Could you detail or list what the detailed minimum requirements were to, that would explain how the other ones were eliminated?
Sure. The minimum requirements, and this was included in the posting, the minimum requirements were a bachelor's degree in public or business administration or related field and 5 years of management experience in administration, human resources, and public finance, or an equivalent combination of education and experience. So that was the verbiage that was included in the profile that was sent out and used to promote the position to individuals.
Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Pat. This is Commissioner Gamble, District 2. Have a question if it's appropriate. You can respond. If not, just let me know. But of those finalists that we will be reviewing, are any of those finalists those that applied at Anoka County?
I don't specifically recall any of them being the same as the Anoka County applicants. But I certainly can go back and double check.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, yes. Good question.
Commissioner Mills?
What don't I know about Anoka County?
No,
Go ahead.
Anoka County just happened to be a recruitment that I worked on previously. Significantly sized county here in the metro. And we went through 2 recruitments to find a good fit for Anoka County.
Commissioner Gamble?
Madam Chair, we had a discussion about this. I had looked at the website for DDA and had just looked at all of their past the history since 2023, I think, or 2013. And so I tracked all of the counties that had county administrators. And then I wanted to see the term that those counties had with the individuals that went into that position to see if there was frequent change. In other words, how good a job did they do in hiring? And then, having gone through that and looked at that, then I had a conversation with Pat, and I said, are there any counties that, because we always say, if we don't find the right person, we will begin again. And so what has your experience been over these years relative to, we didn't have the right person, and we're going to do our due diligence and not make a decision until we find the right person? And he said, recently, Anoka County is a county that they chose to start again. And so I wanted to know, because it's recent, are any of those applicants from Anoka? Because if Anoka said they don't fit, then of course we can have our priorities and our values, but it was a point of information for me.
I think probably we're one of the most unusual counties with the turnover that we've had to experience, both health and family and when moving on. So, you know, within the last 10, 12 years, we've had some turnovers, because of that health and family tragedy and moving on, it's kind of unusual for a small county to go through this, what we are, and we found the right fit. We did. Yes, Commissioner Gale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have some comments, but out of respect for Pat's time, any questions that we have or anything that should be discussed at this point, I would defer to that, but I would like to make some comments. But I don't want to take up his time with my comments, so.
Okay, so for Pat, does anybody else have any questions about the ranking system, the 5, 4, 3, and by next Tuesday, we will have had our turn in looking them all and sitting down with them by Zoom, and then coming with our own point system. Commissioner Mills.
How many should we come to the next meeting with in mind? Like how many ranks?
I would encourage you to select your top 5.
5.
What I will do for our next meeting is I will have a spreadsheet, and I will just simply go around the table asking each commissioner to indicate who their top candidate is. The top candidate will get 5 points. Their second top candidate will get 4 points. And basically I'll have a spreadsheet that will lay out kind of a point system that will then show where you as a board prioritize the different candidates, and then we can certainly have discussion about that. So I would ask for you to identify your top 4 to 5. Some individuals may only have 3 that they're willing to hire, and that's perfectly acceptable as well. But if you can come up with your top 4 to 5, that would be preferred.
Thank you.
Commissioner White.
Will we be seeing their personality profiles?
Yes, you will receive their work personality index. You will receive their information disclosure statement. The information disclosure statement is basically an opportunity for them to be upfront and forward with you about any gaps in their resume. If there's any job where, you know, there was some negative press, we don't encourage going out and getting information from the internet, but, you know, people may bring things up. We want the candidates to be open and honest about, you know, what has happened in their past. And then the last thing is the video interview. You'll get to see how a person presents themselves, how they respond to questions. Oftentimes individuals think, oh, well, they've had these questions to think about. No, they actually haven't. What happens is that they will get a question about a minute in advance, and then the recording goes live. So they have a minute to think about how they're going to respond, and then they have a minute 30 that they can talk and provide you with information. So those are the 3 components, in addition to the resume and the cover letter that you'll be provided with this afternoon.
So we can expect that this afternoon then?
Yes,
Okay, great. Thank you on that, Commissioner Gamble.
yes.
Madam Chair, and just to clarify, Pat, in your opening comment, you said that we had 12, but since 2 have taken positions, so we can expect 5 of the 10.
So you'll have 10 of the 12. I'm sorry.
That's right, okay. But we're going to
Yes,
settle
yeah.
on up to 5. Yeah, that's right. 10 of
Yes,
the
and
12.
then settle on 4 to 5 if you
Yeah,
would.
Thank you.
And another note too, I'm perfectly comfortable if you'd like me to stay on while you make your comments, Commissioner Gamble. If there's anything I can add or contribute, it's entirely up to you.
Commissioner Gamble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Pat. I just want to be respectful of your time, but I do think that it would give, some context too, so that you have an appreciation of just sort of the culture and our history. I appreciate the Chair's comments on our history relative to county administrator. I will say that I was privileged to serve as commissioner at that time in 2023 when we were transitioning to this county administrator form of governance. And we had looked at a coordinator position as well as potential for county administrator. So we evaluated that in the context of what do we think would best serve us. Based upon considerable research and interviewing other county administrators that were well-respected in Minnesota counties, we had 3 of them that participated. And so we were trying to inform our decision, trying to establish our values, and use that as the basis for decision-making. Anytime you have change and you move in a different direction, it's always best practices to evaluate if your expectations are being met. And if you do that, part of what we built into our structure is to have an annual review. So we could do a review and find out what is the county administrator doing well for us, what have we benefited from, and what are the challenges and areas that we need to improve. We can either do that with integrity, or we could go through the motions and ignore the findings. And so I had a town hall meeting to ask the public, what are your expectations for a county administrator? We had meetings with our staff and asked them, what are your expectations? Like we have experienced this time, we had 50% of our staff willing to speak to us, which speaks to the culture issue. Lack of trust, I'm afraid to say anything. And so we kept working in that because we understood we had to build a trust relationship in order to have people be honest with us. And so there were many things that went into this, and then I drafted a document that was available to inform the process. With change comes opportunity. Part of the things that we identified in 2013, and this is the document that I would read. In 2013, the Board of Commissioners voted to hire a county administrator for the first time in its 145-year history. Expectations defined in the administrator's job description included, and these are things that we identified going through this process of informing commissioners' decision relative to move forward and not move forward. So here are the expectations that were described. Make sound judgments and decisions. Institute the appropriate budgetary controls to save taxpayers' money. Keep the board fully advised. Ensure the board receives agenda and pertinent information in a timely manner. Provide timely responses to requests for information from all sources. Work effectively with a variety of people, including those with conflicting or competing interests. Respect individual differences and roles and ensure all voices are heard. Be tactful, helpful, and compassionate towards others. Serve as a unifying rather than a divisive leader within the county. Be a good listener, responsive to county leadership, staff, and public concerns. Be accountable. Take responsibility for mistakes. Follow through on commitments. Be accessible and approachable. Viewed as a collaborative influence with a strong focus on establishing and maintaining effective working relationships at all levels. Be respectful, fair, and unbiased in dealing with others. Be transparent, open, and candid. Be willing to share information. Contribute to a culture of trust. So I would ask, how have those who have held this position met these expectations? What has our experience taught us? And this is why I encouraged the board, after I had been privileged to serve this second time, that we really should be stepping back, evaluating these things that we looked at, that we identified was important, and the qualities that would be brought to the position. And in 10 years, if we looked at these things and we measured them based upon input from commissioners, interrelational, look at staff, look at community, we evaluate all of these things that we said. There are so many incidences in this county. The business park is an example of saying, this is what will happen. And if we measure it, did it happen what we were promised? YMCA, did it happen what we promised? Golf course, did it happen what we promised? County administrative form of government, did it happen what we promised? This is accountability, and it rests with us as commissioners to look at this, and there's a measure of vulnerability that comes in being that transparent, but it's hugely important to the integrity of the positions we have to serve the public. So in my experience in being hugely involved in this process, there are many things that I think, two things. If we choose to move forward with county administrative form of government, we better learn from our 10 years of experience. And we, as those that make the decision, need to know how to be responsible, accountable decision makers. We need to know how to interview and to look for what we're looking for. I will tell you that when Jay Keefe passed away, unfortunately, he was a good man. Well, we went into I mentioned this last week, that staff had said, we're concerned after Jay passed that the board will move too quickly to hire. And so I said, no, hopefully we've learned some things from what we've experienced under Jay. We will identify our values, and we will hold those values in the focus of what we do in hiring to look for those qualities that exist in the candidate. When we finally made our decision, we completely ignored our list of values. And I said that. If you had a recording of that meeting, after we interviewed, we had the input from our MAT team and our staff. The candidate that we selected, I sat back in my chair, I said, you are ignoring the list that was to discipline our decision. You are ignoring it. But we went with other factors that were completely out of the outline we had. And I chose to throw my support because I wanted to set that individual up for success with unanimous decision. So what I am saying to the board is we have a responsibility, and I mentioned last week, I feel that we've abdicated that responsibility as servant leadership on behalf of the constituents that have us represent them by not asking and including their voice in this process. Thank you.
One of the things that is really to our advantage is the fact that we will be able to see these candidates. Before, we never did. We'll be able to see them, and they will be answered questions. We won't have an interaction, but we'll be able to see the candidates as we started when James Yorkie was hired. Before with Jay, that didn't happen with Jeff. So now with your comments, we can all take that into consideration with our own comments of what we think is important for the future administrator for here. We have that advantage of seeing the people before we decide who should come for the personal interview, which is a great advantage. Any comments on that? Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes, one of the things, and I really appreciate Commissioner Gamble bringing up what occurred in 2013, and as you were talking about the values and the qualities of a county administrator, as you were looking over a decade ago, I sat here and looked at our revised job description for the county administrator. And It's amazing that the essential functions and responsibilities, the knowledge, skill, and abilities as drafted by the Personnel Committee and then approved by the County Board really fit what you described and read through. And I also know that DDA did a great job of providing interviews with many, many staff here in this room several months ago. And so I feel like we are looking at the right information. I think that, as Commissioner Storley mentioned, that we do have an opportunity to look at our videos and look at all the criteria, the resumes, the cover letter, personality index, that we are going to be in a very good position to do an evaluation.
So Pat, you can kind of hear some of the areas that we're still kind of concerned about, but I know that you have guided us, especially as Commissioner Sullivan said, for the staff to be a part of interview with you. And, you know, the road that we're taking, the path that we're taking, hopefully will bring the right person. And I know you've gone through, well, 41, and then you've gotten them down to 15, and then down to 10 as we have now. So that's, you know, this is the area that we need to have conversation about before we do make that decision for the final hire.
Yes, and I think, you know, as Commissioner Gamble mentioned, you know, the bullet points or the things that you're looking for, if we were to look on page 9 of the profile, the desired attributes, those bullet points are what came out of my interviews. And I think those are the things that are, you know, because county administrators, whether you're in Cook County or Anoka County, there are some core things that you have to do, but also there's a lot of uniqueness between Cook County and Anoka County. And so I think the desired attributes that not just the commissioners, but also the staff identified are those things that we're trying to reach. We're trying to get candidates that check those boxes off. And I think we had them broken down. I think there were maybe 20 some bulleted items there, but I think that was kind of our attempt to say, what is it that Cook County needs in an individual to be successful?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Thank you. So unless there's any other comments, we'll let Pat go, but does anybody have any other comments directed to Pat? So once again, thank you for joining us, Pat, and we'll look forward to all of that information, all the people, everybody. We have a good amount of homework to do between now and on February 11th. So thanks again, Pat, appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, and if anybody has any challenges, please feel free to reach out to me. Challenges or questions about about the information that you're receiving.
Thank you very much
for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye now. Anything else before we move on? Commissioner White.
I think that question that has been asked has been, why did we not take more time to consider having, perhaps doing a coordinator in lieu of an administrator? And in this particular situation, when our last administrator had to leave, there was no notice. We didn't have 3 months, we didn't have 6 months to have a conversation about should we continue to go forward with this form of government. We were very fortunate to have a very capable and willing in-house person in the name of Rowan, who stepped up with the skills and the personality to take the leadership position, and being aware of his commitment and his sacrifices that he is doing to help this county along. That was part of the reason, a big part of the reason for going forward with administrative form of government. Though though I've never been part of a in-depth discussion about a coordinator form of government. I've not been at the table for that at all. Excuse me, but I do realize that no matter whom is selected, we have a responsibility for oversight of this particular individual. And having served 2 years on the board, I was part of one evaluation, and I thought that it was supposed to be at least annually. I was part of one evaluation of James, and that was it, and that was in my very early months. So I would really hope that we set a standard, or we hold ourselves to a standard of truly being not just to criticize, but to help form an individual to help us in our community, and not let things slide because, oh, he or she is a nice guy. That's irrelevant. Nice guy is really nice, but we need more than just that. And it has to be somebody that interacts well with every facet of our community and of our community within this building, because people in this building are the important people in this building, those that are doing the work. Did not all have the same interactions, nor should they. But some of them did not have particularly positive interactions with all of the different leaderships that we had here. And that should, and as to Commissioner Gamble's statement, employees sometimes are operating in an atmosphere of fear. If they won't speak up, then why won't they speak up? This is kind of a democracy, and there should be no repercussions if someone has a concern or an interaction that felt wrong to them. And we need to make certain we do our job. I mean, whomever is hired has a terrific job, and we are there to help them. But we are here to make certain that the people that work here and the people that live in our county are getting the most bang and the best bang for the buck.
Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your comments, Commissioner Waite. It ultimately falls on commissioners because staff proposes, but commissioners decide. And so we've been entrusted because we've been elected to represent the people, and in that stewardship responsibility role, I would respectfully suggest, Madam Chair, that the county administrator doesn't create the policies. They can suggest us like departmentals and things. It ultimately falls on the commissioners. Staff proposes, commissioners decide. And I spoke with the gentleman, a county commissioner or county administrator for 30 years, highly respected, just retired. And I think I had mentioned in the last meeting, I had conversations with one of the commissioners from his county when I was at the AMC Governance 101. And I contacted him and spoke with him, and I appreciated the conversation. He's well respected. He's been in the position 30 years. He created a culture and a structure in which that county hired from within to move forward with the county administrator. And the commissioner said the reason that happened is because that administrator put a structure in place that served the county so well that that individual that they moved into the position had been mentored and understood that because the culture supported it, which is a healthy indication of good, sound leadership. I asked him, if there's one word that you could use to define the attribute that needs to exist in a county administrator, what would it be? Relational. That's what he said, relational. If there's one word that you would use as a huge red flag when it comes to the county administrator role, controlling. Those are the two words he put forth. And this is, my comment to him is that there are two things. They're identifying on paper what our values are, and in my experience in this hiring process, we have ignored what we identified, so it doesn't mean much. Our premises don't mean much if it's not rightly ordered. So my point is that we can articulate and define that should be done on the basis of our experience, our lived experience as commissioners, as people within the public, as staff, and that is hugely important in informing the values and what it is we're looking for. Then we need to have the discipline to be able to adhere to those things when it gets into the interview process, so we aren't taken up emotionally with charisma and energy that comes into a room when the disciplines we've identified as being important are being completely ignored. And so this is the two things. Inform what it is we really need as a county based upon the input from all of those that have a vested interest. Secondly, understand the discipline involved in being focused on the values we've identified so that we know how to be good interviewers, how to know what we're looking for. And my recommendation when we entered this the first time was, let's not hire a consultant because we need to own this decision. So we moved forward and identified all of these things as a board, independent of a consultant informing and telling us. And we understood this when we got to the point of knowing what we wanted. Then we involved someone to list the position and to shepherd us through the interview process. And we did have video interviews that then led to our finalists that we brought in, and we invited the public in to be in on those interviews so that they could, for themselves, determine and see how we did the business and the responsibility and the accountability that comes with interviewing. So my encouragement is, yes, define through all of the players that have a vested interest what our values are, what our needs are, if we want to call them unique needs, and then define what it is we will use in applications so that we become qualified, disciplined, stay-focused interviewers so that we're protecting those things that we said are important to it. It can be on paper, but if it doesn't work out practically in the interview process, which it hasn't, in my experience as a board member in previous times, then we've abdicated the role we've been entrusted with. So I would just encourage us to dig in and do the hard work.
So this afternoon, we're going to receive that information, and all of us have heard many comments here this morning, so I will move on. And I'll turn it over to Attorney Peterson for our next discussion.
And I would recommend that we move to a closed session, as this portion of the agenda addresses ongoing litigation. So pursuant to Minnesota statute chapter or section 13.03 and 13.05, I would recommend that we move to a closed session.
So
Madam
moved.
Chair? I make a motion to move into closed session.
Support.
All in favor?
Madam
Don't
Chair,
have to.
just a comment. I think in making the motion that we need to identify why we're going into a closed session. So as it's stated on the agenda there, I think just include that in your motion, so.
Absolutely. So I make a motion to recommend that we go into a closed session for the purpose of having confidential conversations related to the ongoing dispute between RS&H and Cook County.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And Rowan, do we know where we're going?
The ITV.
Okay. So we're back from our closed session. We'll reconvene our meeting to continue on with the discussion on the airport runway extension. Commissioner
Madam
Gamble?
Chair, do you make a motion to reopen the meeting at 10:20?
I'll support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor. Okay. Anything else you want to discuss? Commissioner Sullivan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've been dealing with this particular issue for many years, and given the associated costs that the county could incur in the future if we were to go to trial, and after much discussion and negotiation and mediation, I'd like to make a motion to settle the ongoing dispute between RS&H and Cook County as it relates to the airport runway extension by accepting a settlement amount of $345,000 to be received within the next 30 days.
Support?
Commissioner Gamble?
Madam Chair, do we want to, based upon our discussion, just make room for the, preferably for the 30 days and still at 60?
What we did discuss with Stephanie Ball, who is working on our legal behalf and working with County Attorney Peterson, we indicated that we would accept the settlement within 30 days, which is standard practice. We did authorize her up to 60 days if there was a challenge with that.
Any other comments or discussion?
Is the motion supported?
Have a motion and a second?
I support the amendment there.
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Hey,
Opposed, same sign, motion passes. There being nothing else on our agenda, a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Support?
All in favor?
Aye.
hey.
Aye and
Thank
aye.
you all very much.